we begin this second discussion of early China, or ancient China, with the transition from the Neolithic, from the Stone Age, to what's called the Bronze Age. And that's marked in Chinese historical terms by the advent of the Shang dynasty. Now, one of the things that happens with Shang is and we know this from many sources, is that it has the notion of a single king who will be lord over many peoples. And that gives us a kind of a question, right? How did, in a world where there were many peoples, how did a single king legitimate that rule, that imposition of rule? You know, it's easy to say that you don't have to legitimate anything. If you come in with enough power, you can say to people, do or die. But in practice, in the world of, in political history, the world of politics, people seek legitimation. They seek to justify what they're doing and to explain to others why they should accept the power of others being placed over them. Now, in order to talk about this, we come back again to the two major sources we have for ancient China, or for thinking about ancient China. One is artifacts, and the other is texts. But now we're going to see something interesting about texts and artifacts too. Chris Foster, graduate student in early China studies, is here again, somebody with great knowledge of archaeology. And Chris, you've brought in things to make the case that when I talk about legitimation, I need to talk about these things, these great products of the Shang. So what do you have?
Yes, absolutely. If from an archaeological perspective you're going to talk about legitimation in these early periods of the Shang, there's really two types of artifacts that you absolutely have to discuss. So the first would be bronze vessels from the Shang, such as this one here.
Yeah.
Okay. The second would also be what initially was called dragon bones, what we now call oracle bones. And the reason that they are so important is that they are actually the earliest attested form of writing in all China.
And both of these, you argue, have to come into this story of legitimation.
Yes, definitely.
Well, we'll see if they do.
We sure will.
Okay. So the Shang claimed to possess the world and all the peoples in it under their rule, and somehow these bronzes and these oracle bones are going to become part of that story, or dragon bones, if you will. Yu Wen is back with us, who works on Chinese intellectual history and has been talking to us very often about texts. And what do you have to say?
What I have to say is that we also have some evidence from the textual tradition to tell us something about the early legitimation. And so remember the Shangshu that I mentioned?
The book, the classic of documents.
The classic of documents, which is a book about the early sage king's rule. It has different sections. It has a book for Shang, has a book
a set of documents
for Shang, but also here we have set documents for Zhou. Here we have Zhou Shu, and what this piece is talking about is actually about why it was justified for the Zhou to take over the Shang's rule.
Okay.
So in some sense, it is a propaganda piece, and so it has a lot to do with the matter of legitimation.
Okay. So in fact, we can pose that as a second kind of question, right? If Chris's material says to us, how does the Shang legitimate the imposition of its power over other peoples? One's material says, how did the Zhou legitimate overthrowing the Shang? In some sense, these are two sides of the same coin, but they're not necessarily so. If we think about some countries, Japan as an example, where it's impossible to legitimate overthrowing the emperor, who's descended from the gods. The Chinese case is very different. The Chinese found a way to legitimate overthrowing those who had been legitimated, and we'll explain why today.